Under the United States Constitution, one of the amendments that is often cited is the Second Amendment. Basically, is the right to bear arms. Without going into the specific amendments, what has happened since that constitutional amendment is that citizens of the United States, under most circumstances, are allowed the right to bear arms, that being firearms. But it is not an unlimited right. So there are certain individuals that are prohibited from possessing firearms, number one, and there are certain firearms that an individual cannot possess. So oftentimes in my practice, I deal with individuals that run into situations or altercations involving firearms. The most common one is using a firearm in self-defense. That can be in self-defense of themselves or others. In Florida, as is well known, we can raise a stand your ground motion where basically if we state an individual is protecting his or her home, property, themselves, and they can file a motion, a stand your ground motion, and essentially shift the burden of proof to the prosecutor to prove that that individual did not have a legal right to bear arms and use the firearm to protect him or herself in some form of altercation. That's what we hear commonly in Florida. However, there are some other issues with firearms that we often deal with on a federal level. So federal generally involves what's called ATF, is the federal agency. And they normally get involved when individuals are trafficking or allegedly trafficking in firearms. So the way the federal law works is that individuals, private individuals, can sell firearms to themselves, to other people, so long as it is not a business. Unfortunately, I have had situations where clients have not incorporated and or they have not gotten a FFL, which is known as a federal firearms license. And they have begun selling numerous hundreds, thousands of firearms without this license, and it clearly is a business. In that type of situation, you can be charged with essentially illegally selling firearms on a federal level. So it's important in cases like that. I often defend clients and argue that this is essentially a private sale and it hasn't got to the point where it's a business. Individuals can sell firearms, but once it becomes a business, that is where the ATF, Department of Justice, federal authorities can get involved. There isn't a X number of firearms that are sold. It really is a very gray area. And I've defended many clients in situations like that successfully where we've been able to argue that it wasn't a business, therefore they did not need FFL, a federal firearms license. Also, when we deal with firearms, one of the things that we deal with are prohibited individuals that are not allowed to possess firearms. Now, the Second Amendment, as we previously stated, is not all-encompassing. You can be prohibited from owning or possessing a firearm under certain circumstances. Those are the three main ones are this. Number one, you're a convicted felon. If you are a convicted felon and you have not had your Second Amendment constitutional rights restored, you cannot possess or own a firearm. And possession doesn't mean just having the gun in on your person. It can be in your home. And if law enforcement finds that, then you could certainly be arrested. Number two, are you a prohibited person? That could be someone that has been convicted of a domestic violence crime. If you've been convicted of a domestic violence crime, you cannot possess and or own a firearm. Number three, if you have a civil injunction, a domestic violence civil injunction against you, you can also not possess a firearm. And then number four, if an individual, those are generally the three main areas where we see where individuals are charged with illegally possessing a firearm. In the event that you run into any of these circumstances where you have to defend yourself or others, or you're charged with potentially illegally selling of firearms and not having a federal firearms license or what is known as an FFL, or in the third situation, you're a prohibited person, have a prior domestic violence conviction, prior felony conviction, etc., please contact our office. We strenuously believe in the Second Amendment, and we will defend you. We will defend that constitutional right.